On June 11th, 2025, a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (IC) raid at Glen Valley Foods in Omaha, Nebraska, detaining approximately 80 undocumented immigrants, labeled by critics as illegal aliens, exposed a deeply collusive network of city officials, nonprofit organizations, consular offices, and government agencies. The subsequent press conference, led by Mayor John Ewing Jr., intended to clarify municipal roles, but instead unveiled a system allegedly engaged in federal crimes, including harboring, fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, while diverting public and private resources from American citizens. This network, involving figures like Police Chief Todd Schmaderer, Douglas County Commissioner Roger Garcia, City Council Member Danny Begley, Human Rights and Relations Department Director Kaylin Daly DeGilles, and Coordinator Jennifer Rodriguez, alongside organizations such as the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement, CIRA, Nebraska Immigration Legal Assistance Hotline, NILA, Heartland Workers Center, HWC, and Nebraska Immigration Services, NIS, is accused of transforming Omaha's demographics, voting patterns, and economic stability. Beyond these crimes, this article critically examines the civil rights violations perpetrated by these entities, particularly discriminatory practices against U.S. citizens, especially white citizens, through racially profiled services favoring immigrants. It explores how these groups violate anti-discrimination laws, the criminal implications of such practices, and the scamming of public systems by both undocumented immigrants and their facilitators, emphasizing the need for equal application of legal scrutiny. Supplemental sections provide detailed processes, flowcharts, and legal resources for further investigation. Civil rights violations and discriminatory practices. The networks focus on providing services exclusively or disproportionately to undocumented immigrants, refugees, or specific ethnic groups constitutes potential violations of U.S. civil rights laws, particularly Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs receiving federal funds. By prioritizing immigrants, often from Latino, African, or Asian backgrounds, over U.S. citizens, especially white citizens, organizations like CIRA, HWC NIS, Omaha Center for Refugee and Immigrant Services Incorporated, Akrasai, Refugee Empowerment Center, REC, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Family Services, One World Community Health Centers, and the East African Development Association of Nebraska engage in practices that critics argue amount to racial profiling and discriminatory service provision. These entities, funded by public resources, offer legal aid, housing, employment, healthcare, and educational services tailored to immigrants, sidelining citizens who face similar socioeconomic challenges. For instance, CIRA's $5 million budget, drawn from federal grants and foundations like the Omaha Community Foundation, supports legal representation and resettlement services primarily for immigrants, with programs like the Prairielands Freedom Fund explicitly aiding undocumented detainees. One World's $20 million budget, funded by federal grants and patient fees, provides health care with a focus on Latino immigrants, who constitute 65% of its patients. HWC's $1.5 million budget funds civic engagement programs targeting immigrant communities, potentially enabling undocumented individuals to influence local voting. These services, critics argue, exclude white citizens or other U.S. citizens, violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which mandates equal treatment under the law. The Nebraska Commission on Latino Americans, with a $500,000 state-funded budget, explicitly advocates for Latino immigrants, including undocumented individuals, further evidencing racial profiling in service allocation. City officials, including Ewing, Garcia, Begley, DeGilles, and Rodriguez, exacerbate these violations. Ewing, overseeing a $1.35 billion city budget with a $531.1 million general fund, promotes these services as seen in the press conference, directing resources to the Human Rights and Relations Department's $1.2 million budget, which Rodriguez and DeGilles used to coordinate immigrant-focused outreach. Garcia, managing a $612.7 million county budget, aligns with the Nebraska Commission on Latino Americans, prioritizing Latino immigrants over other residents. Begley's support for HWC's programs further tilts city resources toward immigrants. These actions, funded by taxpayer dollars, discriminate against citizens by favoring one group, violating anti-discrimination laws like Nebraska's Fair Employment Practice Act, which prohibits bias in employment and public services based on race or national origin. Consular offices from Mexico, El Salvador, and Guatemala, with budgets of $2 million, $1.5 million, and $1.8 million respectively, provide identification documents and services exclusively to their nationals, indirectly enabling undocumented immigrants to access U.S. resources. This selective service provision, critics argue, constitutes racial profiling, as it prioritizes specific ethnic groups over citizens, potentially violating federal anti-discrimination laws when integrated with U.S.-funded nonprofits like CIRA and One World. Criminal implications of discriminatory practices. These discriminatory practices carry criminal implications under federal and state laws. Title VI violations, when intentional, can lead to civil penalties and loss of federal funding, but knowing discrimination in federally funded programs may also trigger criminal charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, which prohibits deprivation of rights under color of law, carrying up to 1 year in prison or 7 years if bodily injury occurs. Directors like Eric Omar of CIRA, Lena Traslavina-Stover of HWC, Mark Sorensen of NIS, Marilyn Sims of REC, Nazar Rasho of Lutheran Family Services, and Andrea Skokin of One World, along with officials like Ewing, Garcia, DeGilles, and Rodriguez, are potentially liable for orchestrating these discriminatory programs. Entire organizations, including CIRA, HWC, and One World, face liability if their policies systematically exclude citizens based on race or national origin. The network's funding practices amplify these violations. Federal grants from the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement, and Department of Justice, totaling billions, are channeled to CIRA, $5 million, Akrasai, $2 million, REC, $1.5 million, Catholic Charities, $3 million, Lutheran Family Services for $1 million, and One World, $20 million. These funds, intended for broad community benefit, are suspected of being misallocated to undocumented immigrants, violating 18 U.S.C. Section 666, which carries up to 7 years for misusing over $5,000 in federal funds. Wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, with penalties up to 20 years, is suspected when funds are transferred across state lines to support discriminatory programs, as seen with Omaha Community Foundation and Sherwood Foundation grants. Tax evasion under 26 U.S.C. Section 7201, with penalties of 7 years and $250,000 fines, may occur if nonprofits misreport grant usage to the Internal Revenue Service, claiming tax-exempt status for activities favoring illegals. Harboring illegal aliens under 8 U.S.C. Section 1324, punishable by up to 7 years per alien, is a probable crime for CIRA, HWC, NIS, Akrasai, REC, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Family Services, and One World, as they provide legal aid, housing, and employment support to undocumented immigrants. Conspiracy to defraud the United States under 18 U.S.C. Section 371, carrying up to 5 years, is suspected among officials and nonprofits coordinating to obstruct ICE efforts. Consulates, by issuing documents enabling illegal employment, may violate 8 U.S.C. Section 1324A, with fines up to $3,000 per worker, and the Foreign Agents Registration Act under 22 U.S.C. Section 611, facing fines and 5 years for unregistered advocacy. Obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. Section 1505, with a 5-year penalty, is suspected for Schmader's Omaha Police Department and the Douglas County Sheriff's Office due to limited IC cooperation. Scamming the system by undocumented immigrants and facilitators. Undocumented immigrants, including those detained at Glen Valley Foods, are suspected of scamming public systems by using false documents to access employment, healthcare, and welfare benefits, violating federal laws. Illegal entry and unlawful presence. Under 8 U.S.C. Section 1325 and Section 1227, carry penalties of 6 months to 2 years and deportation. False document use and identity theft under 18 U.S.C. Section 1546 and Section 1028 incur up to 7 years each. Many immigrants, critics argue, falsely claim refugee or asylum status, exploiting legal loopholes to access services without qualifying, constituting fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, with up to 5 years imprisonment. Nonprofits facilitate this by providing services to individuals who may not meet refugee or asylum criteria, potentially violating 18 U.S.C. Section 1001 by misrepresenting client eligibility to secure federal grants. Sierra's Prairielands Freedom Fund, for instance, aids undocumented detainees without verifying status, risking fraud charges. One World's healthcare services, prioritizing Latinos, may serve non-eligible immigrants, misusing federal funds. These organizations, by failing to segregate funds for legal refugees versus undocumented immigrants, risk tax fraud and misallocation charges, implicating directors like Omar, Stover, and Skokin. Discriminatory funding and racial profiling. The network's funding practices, prioritizing immigrants over citizens, constitute discriminatory allocation. The City of Omaha's $531.1 million general fund and Douglas County's $612.7 million budget support contracts with Sierra, HWC, and Akrasai, diverting taxpayer dollars to immigrant-focused programs. Federal grants from agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services and Office of Refugee Resettlement are misused when allocated to undocumented immigrants, violating anti-discrimination laws. Private foundations, including Omaha Community Foundation, $100 million grant-making capacity, and Sherwood Foundation, $200 million, fund nonprofits like Sierra and One World, reinforcing racial profiling by targeting specific ethnic groups, such as Latinos or East Africans, over white or other U.S. citizens. This selective funding violates Title VI and Nebraska's anti-discrimination laws, as it excludes citizens from equal access to public resources. Racial profiling is evident in One World's focus on Latino patients and the East African Development Association services for specific immigrant groups, neglecting broader community needs. Such practices, critics argue, are criminal when funded by public dollars, constituting theft under 18 U.S.C. Section 641, with up to 7 years imprisonment, and fraud when misrepresented to federal agencies. Dichotomy of discriminatory practices. The dichotomy of government and charitable entities engaging in discriminatory practices while evading scrutiny is striking. Unlike businesses or clubs, which face rigorous enforcement under anti-discrimination laws, immigrant-focused organizations like Sierra, HWC, and One World operate with impunity, cloaked in charitable or governmental legitimacy. For example, a private employer discriminating against white employees would face lawsuits under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Yet nonprofits providing employment services exclusively to immigrants escape similar accountability. This double standard, critics argue, stems from political and ideological biases, allowing these groups to violate civil rights laws without investigation. The Omaha Police Department and Douglas County Sheriff's Office, by limiting IC cooperation, indirectly support this discrimination, potentially obstructing justice. Federal immigration courts in Omaha, facing backlogs, delay deportations, enabling nonprofits to prolong undocumented presence, further discriminating against citizens needing resources. The Nebraska Equal Opportunity Commission, collaborating with DGILAs, prioritizes immigrant discrimination cases, sidelining citizen complaints, violating equal protection principles. Citizen recourse and accountability. Omaha citizens can take action to address these violations. Reporting suspected immigration crimes, such as harboring by SIRA or HWC, to ICE's tip line at 866-347-2423 or online at www.ice.gov/webform/ice-tip-form is a critical step. Financial crimes like wire fraud or tax evasion by nonprofits can be reported to the FBI's Omaha field office at 402-493-8688 or IRSCI at 800-829-1040. Citizens can request public records from the Omaha City Clerk at 402-444-5555 to expose fund allocations, filing Freedom of Information Act requests with the Department of Homeland Security at FOIA at hq.dhs.gov for federal grant details. When local officials are implicated, citizens can escalate to the DOJ's Public Integrity Section at 202-514-1412 for official misconduct or the DHS Office of Inspector General at 800-323-8603 for grant misuse. The U.S. Attorney's Office for Nebraska at 402-661-3700 can investigate local collusion, bypassing the Omaha City Attorney or Douglas County Attorney. Lobbying the governor and congressional delegates pushes for oversight, while engaging local media amplifies public pressure. To protect communities, citizens can form coalitions to monitor nonprofit activities, file complaints with the Omaha City Council at 402-444-5520, and organize peaceful protests, avoiding incidents like the 4 arrests at Glen Valley for assaulting officers. Joining national groups like Numbers U.S.A. strengthens advocacy for immigration enforcement, ensuring equal application of civil rights and anti-discrimination laws to all organizations, regardless of their charitable facade. Conclusion. The ICE raid at Glen Valley Foods has exposed a collusive network in Omaha, allegedly committing federal crimes and civil rights violations by prioritizing undocumented immigrants over U.S. citizens, particularly white citizens, through racially profiled services. This network, diverting over $600 million in public funds and $50 million in nonprofit budgets, violates Title VI, the Equal Protection Clause, and Nebraska's anti-discrimination laws, while engaging in harboring, fraud, and conspiracy. Federal agencies like IC, FBI, and DOJ, alongside state and local entities, must investigate and prosecute these offenses, with citizens playing a vital role through reporting and advocacy. The lack of opposition among Nebraskans underscores the urgency for action to restore equity and justice. Supplemental sections available at the Nebraska Journal-Herald provide detailed processes, flowcharts, and legal resources for further engagement.